In this video, we are going to discuss about another way in which we can use Groovy scripting for assertions. And now what we are going to check is for timeout. So whenever we send the request to the endpoint URL, there is a certain time within which we should get the response. And if we don't get the response within that time limit, then that request or that connection should be terminated, because there is no point to wait for a message which is taking too long to give the response. So we can add this kind of timeout in our Groovy script and assert that whether we are getting the response within a certain time limit or not. So that is called the SLA timeout. So next what we are going to do is checking SLA timeout using our Groovy script. So in order to check for SLA timeout, what I'm going to do is define SLA. This is another variable which I'm using, message exchange dot get time taken. So this is the method which we are going to use, which is going to get the time during runtime, that what is the time which is taken by the request to give out the response. And then what we are going to do is we are going to validate this particular time only. So let us use int time taken, another variable. So what we are going to do is SLA dot to integer. So I'm putting it equal to a integer, converting it so that we can get the time taken, and we are going to store it in a integer. Okay, so int is used as a data type for storing any integer value. So what we are going to do is the value which we are getting in SLA, we are going to convert it to a integer value. Okay, and next what we are going to do is put a time limit which we are going to expect from the user. Suppose I'm putting as 1000 millisecond, that this is the time in which the response should be received. And then we have deviation. So any time which we are getting which is not in this particular limit, then what is the time difference in that? So deviation is equal to time taken minus time limit. So this is simple maths which we are doing to calculate the time taken, giving it a time limit that it should return in this much time limit. And if it doesn't return in that much time limit, then what we are going to check is for the deviation value. So the deviation is something which we are going to use later on in the assertion, and check that whether this deviation is acceptable or not acceptable. Okay, so you will understand more when we are just going to do the further steps. So what we are now going to do is we are going to check the value of time taken. So as I mentioned, that time taken is something which we are fetching at the runtime. So let me specify if time taken is less than time limit. So we are going to get a success only when the time taken which we are getting is less than the time limit. Suppose if I have set the limit as 1000, so I should get the response back before 1000 milliseconds is reached. So if the time taken which is fetched at the runtime is less than the time limit, then what we are going to say is log.info. We can just print the message, the response is within time limit. Okay, so this is the message which we are going to return. You can add any details you want to this message, but I'm just keeping it simple for now. Otherwise, if this condition is not met, that means if time taken is greater than time limit, then what we are going to do is we are going to return log.error like we were doing earlier. Whenever we are trying to show a error message, so we do log.error. Okay, so in that case what we are going to specify, the response is not within time limit. So we are giving two details, that whether it is within the time limit or not within the time limit. Okay, and then we are going to assert the value, which is deviation. So I'm putting deviation is less than equal to 0. That means the difference between the time taken and the time limit should be less than or equal to 0. So how it can be less than? Only when the time taken is less than time limit. Only in that case it can be less than equal to 0. Otherwise, what message we are going to say? SLA timeout. So there was a timeout which took place, so we can give any message to report this particular condition. Okay, so let us now see how this works. Also, what we can do is we can print out that what was the time taken. We can just check it. So the time taken is, so that we know whether our validation is working correctly or not. So here I'm going to specify the time taken also, which will be printed, and then we can compare with this time limit that okay, the response which was returned is correct or if it is not correct. So both the conditions will be checked. Okay, so let us now run this and check it out. So you can say that here we have got SLA timeout expression. So deviation is less than equal to 0. Values, deviation is coming to 42. So we mentioned that deviation has to be less than or equal to 0. And also in the error message it has printed that the response is not within time limit because the time taken is 1042. So remember that we printed the time taken here. So that is why the time taken has been printed, but it is greater than 1000. So that is why what we are getting is an error, assertion failure. So what we can do is we can run our script multiple times and we can check that what is the time limit, or we can get from our team also that what is the time limit which we are expecting the response to be received, and based on those details we can set this particular time, because we don't want it to fail every time if this is the expected time limit. If this is something which is not expected, then definitely yes, but we can check for a positive scenario that in positive cases the time limit is this much, so we are keeping it for that value, and whenever it fails, at that time we will get to know that it failed because it was not met. So here what I'm going to do is, because this is just a positive case I want to show, so in time limit is equal to 1050, which is greater than what we are getting in time taken. So in that case you can see that the assertion passed because the time taken is 1042. The response is within time limit. So in this way we can assert the time taken by the message. Okay friends, thank you for joining.